Story 1. The Mirror Convoy. Jake Thornton had been hauling freight across the Midwest for 17 years, and in that time, he'd seen just about everything the road had to offer. Weather that could kill you in minutes, drivers so tired they were practically sleeping at the wheel, and enough close calls to fill a book. But he'd never seen anything that made him question reality itself. That changed on a cold November night in 2019, somewhere along Interstate 80 in Nebraska. He was 3 days into a cross-country haul, moving electronics from Sacramento to Philadelphia. The load was valuable, but not particularly heavy, which meant he could make good time if the weather held. He'd left North Platte around 9 in the evening, planning to push through to Des Moines before calling it a night. The highway was nearly empty, just the occasional pair of taillights in the distance and the endless stretch of asphalt lit by his headlights. Around midnight, Jake noticed another semi about a quarter-mile behind him. Nothing unusual about that. Truckers often ended up traveling the same routes at the same times, especially on major interstates. He could see the distinctive pattern of the running lights in his mirrors, steady and constant. The truck maintained the same distance for about 20 minutes, neither gaining nor falling back, which was a little odd, but not alarming. Then Jake's CB radio crackled to life. "Westbound truck at mile marker 312. You've got a good buddy behind you. How's the road looking ahead?" The voice was friendly, professional. Exactly what you'd expect from another driver looking for road condition updates. Jake picked up his mic. "Road's clear all the way from North Platte. Dry pavement, no wind. Should be smooth sailing to the Iowa line." He glanced at his mirrors again. The truck behind him flashed its lights twice. The universal trucker signal for "Thank you." "Appreciate it, driver. Stay safe out there." The radio went silent again. Jake settled back into his seat, adjusting his grip on the wheel. The cab was warm, the diesel engine humming steadily beneath him. He took a sip of coffee from his thermos, grimacing slightly at the taste. It had been fresh 6 hours ago, but now it was bitter and lukewarm. Still, it was caffeine, and that's what mattered. Another 15 minutes passed. The truck behind him was still there, maintaining that same precise distance. Jake found his eyes drawn to the mirrors more often than usual. There was something almost hypnotic about those lights, perfectly steady, never wavering. He tried to make out more details about the rig, but at this distance and in the darkness, all he could really see were the lights themselves. That's when he noticed something strange. His speedometer read 72 miles per hour. He'd been using cruise control since leaving North Platte, locked in at exactly that speed. But when he glanced at his GPS, it showed him traveling at 72 miles per hour as, well, nothing odd about that, except he started paying closer attention to the mile markers as they passed. Mile marker 315 went by. He checked his watch, noting the time down to the second. Then he watched for the next marker. It should have taken about 49 seconds at his current speed. But when mile marker 316 appeared, he looked at his watch again. 52 seconds. He must have miscounted. He tried again with the next marker. This time he was certain. 53 seconds. He was slowing down, but his speedometer still read 72. Jake tapped the cruise control, disengaging it, then re-engaged it. The speedometer didn't budge. He pressed the accelerator slightly. The engine responded, RPMs climbing, but the speedometer stayed locked at 72. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, tapping the gauge with his finger. Instrument malfunction, had to be. He'd need to get it checked out at the next truck stop. But his GPS was still showing 72 as well. Were both systems malfunctioning? He looked in his mirrors. The truck behind him was still there. Same distance, same steady lights. Jake picked up his CB mic again. "Hey, driver behind me at 316. You still back there?" Static. Then, "Right behind you, buddy. You having some trouble?" "My speedometer's acting weird. Can you tell me how fast I'm going? You've been holding steady behind me for a while now." A pause. "Showing 72 on my end. You're looking good." Jake frowned. If he was really going 72, why were the mile markers taking longer to pass? He decided to test something. "I'm going to speed up a bit. Let me know if you see any change." 10-4. Jake pressed the accelerator, watching his speedometer climb to 80. The engine sound changed, definitely working harder. But when he looked at his GPS, it still showed 72. And in his mirror, the truck behind him had adjusted its speed as well, maintaining that exact same distance. "You still showing 72?" Jake asked into the radio. "Affirmative. 72. Steady as she goes." This didn't make any sense. Jake could feel the truck moving faster, could hear it in the engine. But according to his instruments and the other driver, nothing had changed. He eased off the accelerator, bringing his speedometer back down to 72. Or what his speedometer said was 72. He started paying more attention to his surroundings. The landscape looked right for this part of Nebraska. Flat, dark, occasional lights from distant farmhouses. But something felt off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. The road seemed to stretch on forever, each section looking exactly like the last. Of course, that was normal for I-80 through Nebraska. It was one of the most monotonous drives in America. But this felt different, like he was watching the same loop of highway repeat over and over. Mile marker 319. Jake checked his watch again. This time it took 57 seconds to reach the next marker. He was definitely slowing down, no matter what his instrument said. At this rate, he'd be crawling by dawn. He looked in his mirrors again, and his blood went cold. The truck behind him had gotten closer. Not much, maybe 50 feet, but it had definitely closed the gap. And it was still showing the exact same light pattern, the exact same configuration. Jake had been driving long enough to recognize different truck models by their lights alone. This one looked like a Peterbilt 379, similar to his own rig. Very similar. In fact, as Jake stared into his mirror, he realized the light pattern wasn't just similar, it was identical. Same number of running lights, same position, same everything. Like looking at a reflection. His CB crackled again. "Roads clear all the way from North Platte. Dry pavement, no wind. Should be smooth sailing to the Iowa line." Jake's hands tightened on the wheel. Those were his exact words from earlier. The same inflection, the same tone. His own voice played back to him. "Hello?" Jake said into the radio, his voice shaky now. "Who is this?" Static. Then, "Westbound truck at mile marker 312. You've got a good buddy behind you. How's the road looking ahead?" That was the first thing the other driver had said, word for word. Jake's heart was pounding now. He pressed harder on the accelerator, watching his speedometer climb to 90. The engine roared, the cab vibrating with the speed. But the mile markers continued to pass at the same slow, steady rate. And in his mirror, the other truck matched his speed perfectly, maintaining that constant distance. Except now, Jake could see more details. As the truck behind him got closer, despite his attempts to speed away from it, he could make out the specific model. It was a Peterbilt 379, just like his. The same year, too, from what he could tell. Same paint scheme. Same company logo on the side. Same everything. Jake grabbed his CB mic with trembling hands. "This isn't funny. Who are you? Why are you following me?" His own voice came back through the speaker. "This isn't funny. Who are you? Why are you following me?" The truck behind him was close enough now that Jake could see more than just the lights. He could see the driver's window, dimly illuminated by the glow from the dashboard. There was someone in the driver's seat, someone who looked. Jake snapped his eyes back to the road ahead, refusing to look in the mirror again. His mind was racing. This couldn't be real. Instrument malfunction, hallucination from too many hours on the road, something. Anything but what his eyes were telling him. But he could feel it. That presence behind him, matching his every move, getting closer with each passing second. The CB radio was a constant stream now, playing back everything he'd said since first noticing the truck, in perfect chronological order. His own voice, discussing road conditions, asking questions, expressing confusion and fear. Mile marker 323. Jake looked at his watch. 65 seconds since the last marker. He was barely moving now, despite his speedometer reading 95 and his engine screaming. The truck behind him filled his mirrors, so close he should have been able to see the driver clearly. He forced himself to look. Just a glance, to confirm what he already knew. The driver was him. Same baseball cap, same flannel jacket, same beard he hadn't bothered to trim in 2 weeks. The other Jake was staring ahead, hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Exactly how Jake always drove. Their eyes met in the mirror for just a fraction of a second. The other Jake smiled. Jake slammed on the brakes, every instinct screaming at him to stop, to get away from this thing behind him. His truck shuddered, tires screaming on the asphalt. The speedometer finally moved, dropping rapidly. 70, 60, 50, 40. The mirror truck should have crashed into him, should have jackknifed trying to stop. But it maintained that same perfect distance, slowing at the exact same rate. When Jake's truck finally came to a complete stop, sitting in the middle of the right lane of I-80, the mirror truck stopped too. It sat there, 50 feet behind him, engine idling, waiting. Jake's breath came in short gasps. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the steering wheel. He looked at his GPS. It showed him stopped at mile marker 323. He looked at the CB radio, but it had finally gone silent. He looked in his mirror. The other truck was gone. Jake sat there for 10 minutes, unable to move, unable to think. Finally, another truck came up behind him, a freightliner hauling grain. The driver laid on his horn, startling Jake back to reality. He put his rig in gear and started moving again, pulling back up to highway speed. His speedometer worked fine now. So did his GPS. The mile markers passed at the correct intervals. He drove straight through to Des Moines, then kept going all the way to Philadelphia, without stopping except for fuel and legally required breaks. He didn't sleep in the truck. He didn't use the CB radio. And he didn't look in his mirrors any more than absolutely necessary. Jake never drove I-80 through Nebraska again. He changed his routes, added hundreds of unnecessary miles to his trips, just to avoid that stretch of highway. His company thought he was crazy. His wife worried about him. But Jake knew better. Because sometimes, late at night, when he's driving through some other empty stretch of highway, He still hears his own voice on the CB radio. And sometimes, just for a second, he sees those familiar lights in his mirror, maintaining that perfect distance. Story 2. The station that wasn't there. Marcus Chen had a reputation for being the most reliable driver at Westfield Transport. In 22 years, he'd never missed a delivery, never had a preventable accident, and never called in sick. He ran his routes like clockwork, always taking the same roads, stopping at the same places, maintaining the same ironclad schedule. His co-workers joked that you could set your watch by Marcus. He liked it that way. Predictability meant safety, and safety meant survival in an industry where one mistake could kill you. On the night of March 14th, 2021, Marcus was running his regular route from Atlanta to Nashville, hauling automotive parts for a manufacturing plant. He'd made this exact trip hundreds of times, could probably drive it blindfolded. He knew every exit, every hill, every place where cops like to set up speed traps. He left Atlanta at 6 p.m., right on schedule, planning to arrive in Nashville by midnight with time to spare. The route took him up Interstate 75 through northwest Georgia, then across into Tennessee on I-24. It was a clear night, temperature in the mid-50s, perfect driving weather. Marcus had his usual dinner at the Flying J in Cartersville, filled his tanks at the same pump he always used, and was back on the road by 8:30. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Around 10 p.m., as he was passing through the Chattanooga area, Marcus noticed his fuel gauge dropping faster than it should. He'd filled up less than 2 hours ago, and he should have had plenty to make it to Nashville with fuel to spare. But the gauge showed he was down to a quarter tank. He tapped it with his finger, wondering if it was sticking. The needle didn't move. Marcus did some quick mental calculations. Even if his fuel efficiency had somehow dropped dramatically, he should still have more than a quarter tank. But he wasn't the type to take chances. There was a truck stop about 30 miles ahead, just past the Tennessee line. He'd stop there, top off his tanks, and figure out if he had a fuel leak or a gauge problem. 20 minutes later, his fuel warning light came on. The gauge now showed less than 1/8 of a tank. That was impossible. Marcus had been watching his fuel consumption carefully, and his truck simply couldn't burn through diesel that fast. Something was seriously wrong. He started looking for the truck stop, watching the exit signs carefully. But the exits weren't where they should be. He passed mile marker 167, where there should have been a rest area. Nothing. Mile marker 172, which should have had a tourist information center. Just empty highway. The exits he did see were marked with numbers that didn't match his mental map of the route. His GPS wasn't helping. The screen showed him on I-24, right where he should be. But the exits it was calling out didn't match what he was seeing on the road signs. When the GPS said, exit 178, food and fuel, he saw a sign for exit 142 with no services indicated. The fuel warning light was blinking now, urgent and insistent. Marcus started to worry. If he ran out of diesel on the interstate, he'd have to call for emergency fuel delivery, which would cost a fortune and destroy his perfect record. He needed to find a station, and fast. Then he saw it, a green exit sign illuminated by his headlights. Exit 156, fuel, food, lodging. The exit wasn't on his GPS, and he didn't remember it from any of his previous trips, but at this point he didn't care. He needed diesel, and this exit promised it. Marcus took the exit ramp, slowing his rig as the road curved away from the interstate. At the top of the ramp, there was only one option: right turn onto a 2-lane rural highway. No road signs indicated which highway it was or which direction he was heading, but about half a mile down the road, he could see lights. A truck stop, from the look of it. Thank God. As he got closer, Marcus realized it was an old-style truck stop, the kind they didn't build anymore. A single, large building with a diner attached, surrounded by a gravel parking lot. Half a dozen fuel pumps out front, the old-fashioned kind without digital displays. A flickering neon sign read, "Millie's Truck Haven, Diesel, open 24 hours." The place looked like it was from the 1970s, but Marcus didn't care about aesthetics. He needed fuel. He pulled up to one of the pumps, set his air brakes, and climbed down from the cab. The air smelled strange, a mix of diesel and something else he couldn't identify. Something almost sweet, like overripe fruit. The parking lot was empty except for 2 other trucks, both older models that looked like they hadn't moved in years. Rust covered their fenders, and weeds grew up around their tires. Marcus noticed that despite the open 24 hours sign, the building looked dark except for a single light over the front door. He walked to the pump and grabbed the diesel nozzle. No card reader, no display screen, just an old mechanical pump with numbers on rotating drums. There was a handwritten sign taped to the pump. "Pay inside first." Marcus hesitated. Something about this place felt wrong, but he was down to less than a gallon of fuel according to his gauge. He didn't have much choice. He headed toward the building, gravel crunching under his boots. The door was heavy, metal with a small window reinforced with wire mesh. It opened with a long creak. Inside, the truck stop looked exactly like something from 4 decades ago. Linoleum floors in an orange and brown pattern, wood-paneled walls, a long counter with a cash register that had actual buttons and a pull handle. Behind the counter stood a woman who might have been anywhere from 50 to 70 years old, wearing a waitress uniform that matched the era of the building. "Evening, honey," she said, smiling. "Need some diesel?" "Yeah," Marcus replied. "How much do you need up front?" "How much you planning to put in?" "I'll fill both tanks, probably about 200 gallons. The woman pulled out a calculator, the old kind with the paper tape. She punched some numbers. "That'll be $420 even." Marcus blinked. $2.10 a gallon. Diesel hadn't been that cheap in years. He almost said something, but then figured maybe this place just hadn't updated their prices recently. Remote truck stops sometimes had weird pricing. He pulled out his company credit card. The woman shook her head. "Cash only, I'm afraid. Card machine's been broken for a while now." Marcus didn't carry that much cash, never had a reason to. "I've only got about $60 on me. Can I do a partial fill and come back inside to settle up?" The woman's smile didn't waver. "Pump don't work that way, honey. It's all or nothing. You pay for what you want, pump runs till the tank's full, or the money runs out." She paused, studying him. "But I'll tell you what. You look like you're in a bind. You can fill up now, and you come back tomorrow to pay the rest. We trust our drivers here." Something in Marcus's gut told him to leave, to get back in his truck and coast to the next exit on his remaining fuel. But the practical part of his brain won out. If this woman was willing to extend credit, he'd take it. He could drive back tomorrow on his return trip and settle the bill. "That's very generous," Marcus said. I'll definitely be back tomorrow to pay." "Of course you will, honey. Now you go ahead and pump your diesel. When you're done, come back in for some coffee on the house. You look like you could use a break." Marcus returned to his truck, feeling slightly better. He started the pump, listening to the mechanical click, click, click of the old counter. The diesel flowed into his tanks, and he watched his gauge begin to climb. Quarter tank, half tank, 3/4, finally full. He hung up the nozzle and was about to head back inside when he noticed something odd. The other 2 trucks in the lot, the rusty ones he'd seen earlier, had license plates. He walked over to get a closer look, curious about the old-style plates. The first truck had a Tennessee plate from 1979. The second was from 1982. Both trucks looked like they'd been sitting here since those dates, slowly deteriorating. Marcus looked at them more carefully. There were still shipping documents visible through the dirty windows. Cargo manifests faded and yellowed with age. A chill ran down his spine. He looked back at the building. The light over the door flickered, and for just a moment, the entire truck stop seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Then it solidified again, looking exactly as it had before. Marcus got back in his cab without going inside for coffee. He started his engine, released his air brakes, and pulled out of the parking lot as quickly as he could safely manage. In his mirror, he could see the woman standing in the doorway, still smiling, watching him leave. Finding the interstate should have been simple. Just turn left and go half a mile. But when Marcus reached the end of the truck stop's access road, there was no left turn option. The road only went right, heading deeper into rural countryside. No signs, no mile markers, just a narrow 2-lane road disappearing into darkness. Marcus's GPS was useless. The screen showed him still on the interstate, miles from where he actually was. He tried to enter the truck stop's address to get directions back to I-24, but when he typed in Millie's Truck Haven, the GPS returned no results. According to the system, no such place existed. He drove for 20 minutes, looking for any sign that would tell him where he was or how to get back to the interstate. The road wound through dense forest, occasionally passing dark houses or empty fields. No cars, no other trucks, no signs of civilization beyond these scattered structures. Then, ahead in his headlights, Marcus saw something that made his heart race. An interstate entrance ramp. Thank God. He didn't even care which direction it led. He could always turn around at the next exit. He accelerated up the ramp and merged onto the highway. The first thing he noticed was an exit sign. Exit 156. Fuel, food, lodging. The same exit he'd taken to find the truck stop. But that was behind him now, wasn't it? Marcus looked at his GPS. It showed him on I-24, right where he'd been before taking the exit, as if he'd never left the interstate at all. He drove for another hour, paying careful attention to his surroundings. The exits were where they should be now, matching both his memory and his GPS. The mile markers progressed in the correct order. Everything seemed normal. He arrived in Nashville at 11:47 p.m., just 13 minutes off his usual schedule. When Marcus climbed down from his cab to check in at the delivery warehouse, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. His fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. He'd burned through a quarter tank driving from Chattanooga to Nashville, exactly what he would normally use, as if he'd never stopped for fuel at all. But when he checked his pocket, the $60 he'd had was gone. Marcus called the company's safety department the next morning before starting his return trip. He told them he needed to settle a fuel bill at a truck stop on I-24, a place called Millie's Truck Haven. Could they look up the address and contact information? The safety supervisor searched every database they had. No truck stop by that name existed anywhere on I-24 or anywhere else in Tennessee. No records of it ever existing. Marcus gave them the exit number, but there was no exit 156 on that stretch of interstate. The exits went from 152 to 159, skipping the numbers in between. "Are you feeling all right, Marcus?" the supervisor asked. "Maybe you should take a few days off. You've been running pretty hard lately." Marcus made the return trip that afternoon. He drove slowly through the section of I-24 where he'd seen the exit, watching carefully for any sign of the truck stop. There was nothing. No exit, no road, no indication that anything he'd experienced had been real, except his $60 was still gone. And sometimes, when he's driving late at night on empty stretches of highway, Marcus sees a flicker at the edge of his vision. A green exit sign, there and then gone before he can read it. An old neon sign promising diesel and coffee. A woman in a waitress uniform, standing beside the road, smiling and waving him over. Marcus always drives past. He never stops at unfamiliar truck stops anymore, no matter how badly he needs fuel. And he never ever drives with less than half a tank, even if it means breaking his perfect schedule. Because Marcus knows the truth now. Some debts can never be fully paid, and some stops on the road aren't meant for the living. Story 3. The Passenger. Linda Martinez had been driving solo for 8 years, ever since her team driving partner and husband, Ramon, had died in a traffic accident. She preferred it that way now. No conversation, no negotiating over music or temperature, no waiting for someone else to wake up for their shift. Just her, the road, and the endless miles. It was lonely sometimes, but loneliness was better than loss. On a Friday night in October 2020, Linda was hauling refrigerated goods from Miami to Charlotte, running up the eastern coast of Florida on I-95. The load was time-sensitive, fresh produce that needed to maintain a constant 34 degrees. She'd been monitoring her reefer unit obsessively, checking the temperature display every few minutes. The unit was getting old, and the last thing she needed was for it to fail and spoil thousands of dollars worth of cargo. Just past Fort Pierce, around 2 in the morning, she pulled into a rest area to use the facilities and grab a quick snack from her cooler. The rest area was nearly deserted, just 3 cars and one other semi parked far across the lot. Linda preferred the quiet stops. Fewer people meant fewer problems. She was walking back to her truck, keys in hand, when she noticed someone standing near her trailer. A man, tall and thin, wearing what looked like a business suit. That was odd. You didn't see many people in business suits at rest areas in the middle of the night. As Linda got closer, she could see he was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a lined face. He was staring at her trailer with an intense expression, like he was studying it. "Can I help you?" Linda called out, keeping her distance. After 8 years driving alone, she'd learned to be cautious. The man turned to her, and his face broke into a relieved smile. "Oh, thank God. I was hoping the driver would come back. I'm in a terrible situation, and I really need help." Linda stayed where she was, hand moving toward the pepper spray on her keychain. "What kind of situation?" "My car broke down about 10 miles back," the man said, gesturing vaguely behind him. "My phone's dead. and I really need to get to Jacksonville tonight. I have a meeting first thing in the morning. Critical business. I saw your truck has Florida plates, and I'm hoping you're heading north. I can pay you $500 cash if you could give me a ride to the next truck stop with a phone. Linda's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't pick up hitchhikers, ever. Company policy forbade it, insurance wouldn't cover it, and it was just asking for trouble. But $500 was $500, and Jacksonville was on her route. The man looked harmless enough, well-dressed and professional. Probably some businessman whose expensive car had failed him at the worst possible time. I don't usually do this, Linda said carefully. Company policy. I completely understand, the man replied. And I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I'll show you my ID. You can take a picture of it, whatever makes you comfortable. I just need to get to a phone so I can call a tow truck and figure out my car situation. Against her better judgment, Linda agreed. The man showed her his driver's license, Robert Chambers, address in Jacksonville, and she took a photo of it with her phone, sending it to her sister with a text. Giving this guy a ride to next truck stop. Call police if you don't hear from me in an hour. The man waited patiently while she did this, understanding her caution. Robert climbed into the passenger seat, settling in with a grateful sigh. I really appreciate this. You're a lifesaver. Linda pulled back onto I-95, checking her mirrors carefully as she merged. The highway was quiet, just occasional cars and a few other trucks. Robert sat silently for the first few minutes, looking out the window at the dark landscape passing by. Been driving long? He asked eventually, his voice conversational. 8 years solo. Did some team driving before that. Solo, that's tough. Must get lonely. I manage. Linda kept her eyes on the road, not particularly interested in conversation. She just wanted to get this guy to the next truck stop and collect her $500. Robert nodded, falling silent again. But Linda noticed something odd. He wasn't moving. She could see him in her peripheral vision, and he was sitting completely still. Not fidgeting, not adjusting his position, not moving at all. People didn't sit that still. Even sleeping people shifted around. You okay over there? Linda asked. Fine. Just tired. It's been a long day. But still, he didn't move. Just stared straight ahead, hands folded in his lap. Linda felt a prickle of unease. Something was off about this guy. The way he sat, the way he stared. Something about his voice that didn't quite sound right. She started to regret picking him up. Only 30 more miles to the next truck stop, she told herself. Drop him off, get paid, move on. So what kind of business are you in? Linda asked, trying to make conversation to ease her nerves. Robert didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, almost dreamy. I'm in transportation, moving things from one place to another. It's very important work. Yeah, what kind of things? Various items, goods, products, sometimes people. Whatever needs to be moved. He turned to look at her then, and Linda felt her breath catch. His eyes were wrong. Not obviously wrong, but something about them made her skin crawl. Too dark, like looking into empty wells. Right, Linda said, focusing hard on the road. Sounds interesting. Oh, it is. Very interesting. I've been doing it for a very long time. Longer than you've been alive, probably. He smiled, and his teeth seemed too white in the darkness of the cab. You know, I used to drive trucks myself back in the day, before I moved up to management. Linda didn't respond. She was watching the mile markers, counting them down. 26 miles to the truck stop. She could endure 26 miles of uncomfortable conversation with a weird passenger. "Do you ever wonder about the people you're transporting?" Robert asked suddenly. "I don't transport people, just freight." "But you are. Right now. You're transporting me." His voice had changed, become more intense. "Do you wonder where I'm really going? What I really am? Look, buddy, I'm just giving you a ride to a truck stop. That's it. Let's not make this weird." Robert laughed, a sound that made Linda's hands tighten on the wheel. "Too late for that, I think. It's been weird from the beginning. You just didn't want to see it." Linda glanced at him again. He was still sitting in that unnaturally still way, hands folded, staring straight ahead. But now she noticed other things. His suit looked old-fashioned, the kind of cut they made in the 80s or 90s. His skin had a strange quality to it, like it wasn't quite the right texture. And he wasn't breathing. She watched his chest, looking for the rise and fall of respiration. Nothing. "Who are you?" Linda whispered. "I told you. Robert Chambers, from Jacksonville. Or at least I was, a long time ago. Things change. People change. Death changes everything." He finally moved, turning his whole body to face her. "I've been waiting at that rest stop for 17 years, Linda. Waiting for someone like you." Linda's heart hammered in her chest. She looked at the door locks. Engaged. Good. Not that locks would help if this thing decided to do something. "What do you want?" "Just a ride. That's all I've ever wanted. Just one more ride up this highway, to see what it looks like now. To remember what it was like to be alive and moving and going somewhere." His voice was sad now, wistful. "I died on this road, you see. Right around mile marker 207. Truck driver fell asleep, crossed the median, hit me head on. Instant, they said. I didn't feel anything." Mile marker 207 was coming up. Linda could see it in her headlights, about a quarter-mile ahead. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I need you to get out of my truck." "I will. Right at 207. That's where I always get out. That's where I belong." Robert turned back to face forward. "I just wanted to ride one more time. To remember. Is that so terrible?" The mile marker flashed past. Robert began to fade, becoming translucent. Linda could see through him to the passenger door, to the dark highway beyond. "Thank you," he said, his voice growing distant. "Thank you for not leaving me there." Then he was gone. The passenger seat was empty, as if he'd never been there at all. Linda pulled onto the shoulder, her whole body shaking. She sat there for 10 minutes, breathing deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. Finally, she checked the photo she'd taken of Robert's license. The photo was blank. Just a black screen, like she'd taken a picture of nothing. Linda pulled back onto the highway and drove straight through to Charlotte, not stopping even for fuel. When she got there, she told her dispatcher she was taking a week off. Personal emergency. They didn't argue. Linda never took time off. She spent that week researching accidents on I-95 near Fort Pierce. It took some digging through old news archives, but she finally found it. October 2003, a fatal accident at mile marker 207. Robert Chambers, age 58, killed instantly when a drowsy truck driver crossed the median. The article included a photo. The same man who'd sat in her passenger seat, wearing the same outdated suit. Linda went back to driving after her week off. She still runs I-95, still hauls refrigerated loads up and down the eastern seaboard. But she never stops at that rest area near Fort Pierce. And she never, ever picks up hitchhikers, no matter how desperate they seem or how much money they offer. Because Linda knows now that not everyone looking for a ride is among the living, and some passengers are carrying burdens far heavier than any cargo she'll ever haul. She still checks her passenger seat sometimes, late at night when the road is dark and empty, just to make sure it's really empty. Most of the time it is. But occasionally, just for a second, she sees the outline of a man in an outdated suit, hands folded in his lap, staring out at the highway that killed him. And every time she passes mile marker 207, her radio crackles with static, and she hears a voice whisper through the interference, "Thank you." Story 4. The Loop. Derek Williams was 3 weeks into a 6-week haul across the northern United States, a milk run route that took him from Seattle to Boston and back, with 24 stops in between. It was tedious work, but it paid well, and Derek had been doing it for 5 years. He knew every turn, every way station, every decent place to grab coffee. The route was so familiar, it had become almost meditative, his hands and feet operating the truck while his mind wandered to other things. On this particular trip, a Sunday evening in February 2018, Derek was crossing Montana on Interstate 94, heading east toward North Dakota. This was one of the loneliest stretches of the route. Hundreds of miles of flat plains and rolling hills, with only occasional towns breaking the monotony. The weather was clear but cold, temperature hovering around 15 degrees, and there was old snow on the ground from a storm earlier in the week. Derek had left Billings around 4 in the afternoon, planning to make it to Bismarck by midnight. It was a straight shot, about 500 miles of mostly empty highway. He'd driven it hundreds of times before. He was listening to a true crime podcast, only half paying attention, when he noticed something odd about the highway ahead. There was a church, a small white church sitting about 100 yards off the highway, positioned on a slight hill. It had a tall steeple with a cross on top, and warm light glowed from its windows. Derek noticed it because churches weren't that common out here, and this one looked old-fashioned, like something from a century ago. As he passed it, he checked his odometer, noting the mileage out of habit. 127,834 miles. About 15 minutes later, Derek saw the church again. Same white building, same steeple, same warm lights in the windows. He frowned. 2 similar churches on the same highway. That was unusual, but not impossible. Maybe there was a particular denomination that favored this style of architecture. He noted his odometer again. 127,153 miles. 19 miles between the churches. Derek had driven those 19 miles in 15 minutes, which meant he'd been averaging 76 miles per hour. A bit fast, but normal for Montana's 80-mile-per-hour speed limit when traffic was light. Everything was fine, except 15 minutes later, he saw the church again. Same building, same position relative to the highway, same lights. Derek's hands tightened on the wheel. 3 identical churches. That didn't make sense. He looked at his odometer. 127,872 miles. 19 miles. 15 minutes. The same church. Derek's podcast was still playing, the host discussing a murder case from 1987. He turned it off, suddenly needing silence to think. He was tired, that had to be it. 3 weeks on the road, sleeping in the cab, eating truck stop food. Maybe he was more exhausted than he'd realized. He was seeing things, getting confused. He focused on the highway, watching carefully for landmarks. A grain elevator, dark and abandoned. A farmhouse with a blue roof. A billboard advertising a casino in Glendive. He passed all of them, noting their positions and his odometer readings. 15 minutes later, the church appeared again. Derek's stomach dropped. He slowed down, pulling onto the shoulder, and stopped. He sat there, engine idling, staring at the church. From this distance, he could see more details. The white paint was peeling in places. There was a graveyard next to it, headstones covered in snow. A dirt driveway led up to it from the highway, though there was no road sign indicating what it was or how to reach it. Derek grabbed his CB radio. "Any drivers out there? This is the eastbound truck at mile marker." He looked for a mile marker, but didn't see one. "Somewhere on I-94 in Montana. Anyone copy?" Static, then a crackle and a voice. "I copy you, driver. What's your 20? "That's just it, I don't know. I've been driving east from Billings for about an hour. Should be somewhere around Forsyth by now. But something weird is happening. Do you see any trucks on your screen?" "Negative. I'm not near Montana. I'm down in Wyoming on 80. What's the problem?" Derek hesitated. How did he explain this without sounding crazy? "I keep seeing the same landmark, like I'm driving in a loop or something." A pause. "You sure you're on the right highway? Maybe you got turned around." "I'm sure. I-94 east, same as always. But..." The radio crackled again, but this time it was a different voice. "Westbound truck. Do you need assistance? Please state your location and emergency." That was wrong. No one had called for emergency assistance. "No emergency, I just..." "Sir, please state your location and the nature of your emergency." Derek looked at his CB radio. The channel indicator showed he was on channel 19, the standard trucker channel. But that second voice had sounded official, like a dispatcher or emergency operator. They didn't monitor channel 19. "I'm not in an emergency," Derek said carefully. "I'm just trying to figure out where I am." "Sir, please stay with your vehicle. Help is on the way." "I don't need help, I just..." Derek stopped. The church, which had been 100 yards away off the highway, was now visible in his driver's side mirror. Behind him. He hadn't moved. His truck was still parked on the shoulder, engine idling, exactly where he'd stopped. But the church had moved from in front of him to behind him. Derek looked at his odometer. 127,191 miles. It had gone up 19 miles while he was sitting still. His heart racing now, Derek put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. He accelerated quickly, pushing his speed up to 85. He passed the grain elevator, the farmhouse with the blue roof, the casino billboard. All the same landmarks in the same order. His podcast had restarted somehow, the host's voice picking up in mid-sentence describing the same murder case. The church appeared ahead. Derek didn't slow down. He roared past it at 85 miles per hour, watching it in his mirrors as it receded behind him. His odometer clicked forward. 127,192. 127,193. 127,894. The numbers advanced normally, 1 mile at a time. He checked his GPS. It showed him on I-94, between Billings and Miles City, right where he should be. But when he looked at the estimated arrival time in Bismarck, it said, "calculating," and never changed from that. The blue line of his route on the screen flickered, disappearing and reappearing. 15 minutes later, the church appeared again. Derek was expecting it this time, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. He looked at his odometer. 127,910 miles. 19 miles exactly. He was stuck in a loop. 19 miles of highway, repeating over and over, and he couldn't find a way out. Derek tried to remember if there had been any exits, any side roads, any way off this stretch of I-94, but he couldn't recall seeing any. Just the highway, stretching endlessly ahead and behind, with the same landmarks appearing over and over. Derek grabbed his CB again. If anyone can hear me, I need help. I'm stuck on I-94 in Montana, and something is very wrong. I keep driving, but I'm not going anywhere. Please, if you can hear me, send help. His own voice came back through the speaker, slightly delayed. If anyone can hear me, I need help. Derek threw the mic down. He tried his cell phone next, but there was no signal. Not unusual for this part of Montana, but frustrating nonetheless. He opened his Maps app, hoping the GPS would give him more information, but the app just showed a loading screen that never resolved. He kept driving. Church, grain elevator, farmhouse, billboard, church. The same 19-mile loop, over and over. Derek lost count of how many times he'd seen each landmark. 10 times, 20. His odometer kept clicking forward, the numbers advancing in their steady progression. But the world outside his windows stayed locked in the same endless repetition. He tried stopping again, this time getting out of the cab to look around. The air was bitterly cold, the wind cutting through his jacket immediately. He walked to the edge of the highway, looking out at the landscape. Snow-covered plains stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional rise or depression in the land. The church sat on its hill, lights warm and inviting. Derek wondered if anyone was inside, if he could walk over there and ask for help. He started toward it, taking perhaps 10 steps before something made him stop. The church was the same distance away as it had been when he started walking. He took 5 more steps, almost running now, but the church stayed exactly where it was, never getting closer. When Derek looked back at his truck, it had receded into the distance, much farther away than the 20 or 30 steps he'd taken. Derek ran back to the truck, which seemed to take forever, each step eating up far more distance than it should. When he finally reached it, gasping in the cold air, he climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. His hands were shaking. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. It wasn't a navigation error or confusion from fatigue. Something had him trapped here, in this stretch of highway, repeating the same 19 miles for reasons he couldn't understand. He started driving again, because stopping didn't help. Church, elevator, farmhouse, billboard, church. His podcast had looped back to the beginning, the host introducing the episode he'd already heard twice. Derek turned it off. The silence was better. Hours passed. Derek had no idea how many loops he'd completed. His odometer showed 128,231 miles, which meant he'd driven over 400 miles. But he was still on the same 19-mile stretch of highway, still seeing the same landmarks. The sun should have risen by now. He'd been driving for at least 6 or 7 hours, but it stayed dark outside, perpetual night with the same scattered stars overhead. Then, on one pass, Derek noticed something different. The church lights flickered. Just for a second, they dimmed, and then came back up. Derek slowed down, watching carefully. On the next loop, they flickered again, longer this time. On the third loop, the lights went out completely, leaving the church dark against the night sky. The church. That was the key. Derek was suddenly certain of it. The church was the center of this, the anchor point of the loop. Everything else, the elevator, the farmhouse, the billboard, they were just background. But the church was important. On the next pass, Derek didn't just drive by. He turned his wheel sharply, taking his truck off the highway onto the shoulder, then onto the snowy plain. His rig wasn't designed for off-road driving, and he felt the wheels slip and catch on the uneven ground. But he kept going, steering directly toward the church. It didn't get closer. No matter how far he drove, the church stayed the same distance away, fixed in space like a mirage. Derek pushed harder, his engine straining, but it was no use. The church was unreachable. He turned back toward the highway, but the highway was gone. In every direction, just snow-covered plains stretching to the horizon. No road, no landmarks, nothing. Derek's breath came in short gasps. He was lost now, truly lost, with no reference points and no way to orient himself. Then he saw lights in his mirrors. A vehicle approaching from behind. Derek stopped and looked back. It was another semi, moving across the plain toward him. As it got closer, Derek could see it more clearly. An older model truck, maybe from the 90s, pulling a standard box trailer. It pulled up alongside Derek's truck and stopped. The driver's window rolled down, and a man leaned out. He was older, maybe 70, with weathered skin and gray hair. "You lost too," he called across the gap between trucks. "I think so," Derek called back. "I've been driving in circles for hours. Can't find the highway." "Yeah, that happens here. Been driving around out here for a while myself. 3 years, by my count, though time gets funny." The old man spoke casually, like he was discussing the weather. 3 years? You've been stuck here for 3 years? Seems like it. Don't need to eat or sleep anymore, so it's hard to be sure. Just drive around, looking for the way out. Haven't found it yet. The old man smiled, seemingly unconcerned. "Name's Harold. Good to have some company for a change." Derek's mind reeled. 3 years. This man had been trapped in this place for 3 years. There has to be a way out. We just need to find it. Harold shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe we're meant to be here. I've been thinking about it a lot. That church, you seen it? I think that's where we're supposed to go. Not to it, but through it. If that makes sense. Nothing makes sense. I just want to get back on I-94 and finish my route. I wanted that too at first. Now I'm not so sure there is an I-94 anymore. Not for us. We're somewhere else, somewhere between. Harold put his truck in gear. But you do what you think is best. I'm going to keep looking. Maybe I'll see you around. The old truck pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. Derek sat alone again, his engine idling, surrounded by endless snow and night. He thought about Harold's words. Through the church, not to it. What did that mean? Derek put his truck in gear and started driving again. Not toward the church, and not looking for the highway. He just drove, picking a direction and maintaining it. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. The snow plain stayed exactly the same, unchanging and empty. Then, ahead, Derek saw something. A light, different from the church lights. This one was bright and white, like a floodlight. As he got closer, he could see it was mounted on a pole, and beneath it was a road, a highway. I-94, with a green interstate sign clearly visible. Derek accelerated, pushing his truck toward the light and the highway. This time, unlike the church, he got closer with each passing second. The distance decreased, 50 yards, 40, 30. He could see the asphalt now, the white lane markings, the solid reality of the road. His truck reached the highway, and Derek pulled onto it with a feeling of overwhelming relief. He checked his mirrors. The snowplane was still there, stretching away behind him, but he was back on solid pavement. He was free. Derek drove for another hour before stopping at a truck stop in Glendive. When he checked his logbook, it showed he'd been driving for only 3 hours since leaving Billings, not the 7 or 8 he'd experienced. His odometer showed 127,934 miles. He'd traveled exactly 100 miles, the correct distance from Billings to Glendive. The loop, the church, the snowplane, Harold, none of it appeared in any record. It was as if those hours had never happened, collapsed into normal time and space. But Derek knew the truth. He'd been somewhere else, somewhere wrong, and he'd barely escaped. He completed his route to Boston and back to Seattle, but Derek never took that contract again. He changed his routes, avoiding I-94 through Montana entirely. He drives southern routes now, through warmer states where the highways are busy and well lit. He never wants to be that isolated again, that far from help and reality. Because Derek knows that highways can loop back on themselves in ways that defy geography. And somewhere on I-94 in Montana, there's still a white church with a tall steeple, its lights flickering in the darkness. And somewhere out there, an old man named Harold is still driving in circles, looking for a way out he may never find. Derek hopes Harold makes it, but he's not going back to check. Story 5. The Voice on the Radio. Patricia Trish. Okonkwo had been driving trucks since her military discharge in 2012, using the discipline she'd learned in the Army to build a successful career in freight transport. She ran dedicated routes for a pharmaceutical company, hauling temperature-controlled medical supplies across the Southwest. It was steady work with good pay, and Trish took pride in her perfect safety record and on-time delivery rate. She was a consummate professional, always prepared, always focused. On a Thursday night in August 2019, Trish was making a run from El Paso to Phoenix, carrying a shipment of insulin and other diabetic medications. The route took her west on Interstate 10 through the southern New Mexico desert, then across Arizona through Tucson and up to Phoenix. It was a drive she'd made at least once a month for the past 3 years, usually uneventful if you could handle the heat and the occasional dust storm. Trish left El Paso at 7 p.m., hoping to arrive in Phoenix by 2 or 3 in the morning. The first hour was fine. Still hot from the day, but cooling down. Traffic moderate, no problems. Her reefer unit was maintaining perfect temperature, and she was making good time. Around 8:30, just past Las Cruces, Trish's CB radio crackled to life. Eastbound truck approaching Deming. Be advised there's an accident at mile marker 68. Right lane blocked. Expect delays. Trish glanced at her CB. She hadn't touched it, and she wasn't near Deming yet. Someone else must have been broadcasting. "Thanks for the heads up," she said into her mic. "What's your 20? No response. Just static. Trish shrugged and kept driving. False calls happened sometimes. People broadcasting on the wrong channel, or equipment picking up stray signals. Nothing to worry about. 10 minutes later, the radio crackled again. "Westbound truck near Lordsburg. Check your tandems. Looks like you've got a low tire on the passenger side. Trish looked at her tire pressure monitoring system. All tires showed normal pressure, and she wasn't near Lordsburg. She was still east of Deming. Negative on the low tire, she said into the mic. All pressures normal. Who is this? Static. Then faintly, as if from very far away. Just trying to help. Stay safe out there. The voice was male, older, with a slight southern accent. Something about it made Trish uncomfortable, though she couldn't say exactly why. Maybe it was the way he said, "Stay safe," like it was a warning rather than a pleasantry. Trish drove on. The sun set completely, leaving her with just her headlights and the occasional passing car. The desert at night was profoundly dark, the kind of darkness you only found far from cities. Trish had grown to appreciate it over the years. The stars were incredible out here, dense and bright, in ways urban dwellers never saw. At 9:15, the voice returned. Truck approaching Lordsburg. You're going to want to stop at the Flying J. They've got a warning out for dust storms ahead. High winds, zero visibility. Better to wait it out. Trish checked her weather app. No dust storm warnings. Clear skies all the way to Phoenix. She looked outside. The night was calm, no wind at all. I'm not showing any weather warnings, she said into her CB. Where are you getting your information? Trust me on this. Pull off at the Flying J. You don't want to be on the road in the next hour. There was something insistent in the voice now, almost urgent. Trish felt a chill despite the warm cab. Identify yourself. Who is this? A friend. Someone who knows this road. Please, pull off at the Flying J. Trish didn't like taking orders from strangers, but something in the voice made her consider it. She was approaching the Lordsburg exit anyway, and she could use a break to stretch her legs and check her equipment. If there was a dust storm coming, better to be safe. She took the exit and pulled into the Flying J, parking in the truck area. Everything looked normal. A dozen other trucks scattered around the lot, drivers sleeping or taking their mandatory breaks. The store was open, bright fluorescent lights visible through the windows. A perfectly ordinary truck stop. Trish sat in her cab for a minute, engine idling, trying to decide if she'd made the right call. No sign of any dust storm. The night was clear and calm. She grabbed her CB mic. Okay, I'm at the Flying J like you said. I don't see any storm. What's this about? No response. Just static. Trish waited 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing. She was about to pull back onto the highway when her phone buzzed with an alert. Flash flood warning for I-10 between Lordsburg and Tucson. A sudden storm cell had appeared on the radar. Heavy rain expected within the next 30 minutes. The weather app she'd checked earlier hadn't shown it, but this was the National Weather Service, pushing out an emergency alert. Trish stared at her phone. Not a dust storm, but a flash flood. Close enough. How had the voice on the radio known? Storm cells could appear quickly in the desert, but they usually showed up on radar long before they became dangerous. She stayed at the truck stop for 2 hours, watching the rain hammer down outside. Other trucks pulled in, drivers surprised by the sudden storm. When it finally cleared and Trish got back on the road, she saw evidence of how bad it had been. Standing water in the ditches, debris washed across the highway. Even a few cars pulled onto the shoulder with water damage. If she'd been driving through this, in a heavy truck carrying momentum, she might have hydroplaned or hit standing water too fast. The voice had possibly saved her from an accident. Thank you, Trish said into her CB. not really expecting a response. "Whoever you are, thanks for the warning." Static. Then so faint she almost missed it. "You're welcome. But be careful. The road gets worse ahead." Trish drove more cautiously after that, hyper-aware of her surroundings. The voice didn't speak again for almost an hour. Trish was passing through Benson, about an hour east of Tucson, when the CB crackled back to life. "Truck approaching Tucson. You need to pull over. Right now. There's a vehicle coming up behind you, and the driver is impaired. He's going to hit you if you don't move." Trish checked her mirrors. She could see a car about a quarter-mile back, moving fast. Too fast for this section of highway. As she watched, the car swerved across the lane divider. Overcompensated, swerved back. Definitely impaired, either drunk or on drugs, or having some kind of medical emergency. Without questioning, Trish pulled onto the shoulder and slowed down. The car roared past her seconds later, still swerving erratically. She watched it disappear into the distance, then pulled back onto the highway. "Thank you," Trish said into her CB. "That driver would have rear-ended me. You just saved my life." "That's twice now, but there's going to be a third. And that one is going to be harder." Trish felt ice in her stomach. "What do you mean? What's going to happen?" "I can't tell you exactly. But when you get to Phoenix, don't take your regular route to the delivery warehouse. Take the surface streets. Stay off the I-17 connector." "Why? What's wrong with the I-17? Just trust me, please. I've been trying to prevent this for a long time now. Don't take I-17. The radio went silent. Trish tried calling back, asking questions, demanding answers. But the voice didn't respond. She drove the rest of the way to Tucson in silence, her mind racing. Who was this person? How did they know what was going to happen? And most importantly, should she trust them? Trish's regular route into Phoenix involved taking I-10 to the I-17 connector, then north a few miles to the delivery warehouse. It was the fastest route, the one she always took. But the voice had told her to avoid it. She thought about the two warnings that had already been correct: the flood and the impaired driver. The voice had been right both times, had potentially saved her from serious accidents. Maybe she should listen to this third warning too. But what if this was something else? What if someone was setting her up, trying to get her to change her route for some reason? Truck hijackings did happen, though they were rare. Maybe someone knew she was carrying valuable pharmaceutical cargo and was trying to route her through an ambush. Trish was still debating with herself when she reached Phoenix. It was just past 2 a.m., and she was only a few minutes from her decision point. Take I-17 like normal, or trust the mysterious voice, and take surface streets. In the end, her military training made the decision. When you had reliable intelligence warning you away from danger, you listened. Even if you didn't understand the full context, you respected the warning. Trish took the exit for surface streets, bypassing the I-17 connector entirely. The surface route added 20 minutes to her drive, winding through industrial areas and suburban streets before reaching the warehouse district. Trish kept checking her CB, hoping for some explanation, but the voice stayed silent. She pulled into the delivery warehouse at 2:40 a.m., right on schedule despite the detours. As she was unloading her cargo under the warehouse manager's supervision, one of the other delivery drivers came running in, phone to his ear, face pale. "There's been a massive accident on I-17, he said. Multiple vehicles, including 2 semis. One of them jackknifed across all lanes. It happened about 20 minutes ago." Trish felt her blood run cold. 20 minutes ago. Right when she would have been on that connector, if she'd taken her normal route. "Anyone hurt?" she managed to ask. "They're saying multiple fatalities. Emergency crews are still trying to get everyone out. It's bad." Trish walked out to her truck on shaking legs. She climbed into her cab and picked up her CB mic. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved my life. 3 times. Who are you?" The radio crackled. The voice came through, clearer now than it had been all night. Someone who learned too late. Someone who didn't listen to the warnings. "I died on that connector, Trish. 2 years ago. Jackknifed my rig, killed myself and 3 other people. I've been trying to prevent it from happening to others ever since. The road, it speaks to some of us, shows us what's coming. Most drivers can't hear it, but you could. You listened." Trish's hands trembled. "But if you died 2 years ago, how are you?" "I don't know. I just know I'm here, stuck on this highway, watching the same accidents happen over and over. Sometimes I can change things, save someone, like you. Other times, I'm too late, or they don't listen, and I have to watch them die just like I did." The voice paused. "You're going to be okay now. The danger is past. But remember this night, Trish. Remember that the road speaks, and when it warns you, you listen. Wait, don't go. Tell me your name. Let me." Static, then nothing. Trish called out several more times, but the voice didn't return. She sat in her cab for a long time, staring at the CB radio, trying to process what had happened. The next day, Trish did some research. She found the accident report from 2 years earlier. A truck driver named Wayne Dawson had jackknifed on the I-17 connector during a delivery run, causing a multi-vehicle accident that killed 4 people, including himself. The report included a photo. Trish didn't recognize the face. She'd never met Wayne Dawson in life. But somehow she knew. That was the voice. That was the man who had saved her life 3 times in one night. Trish still drives the Southwest routes, still delivers pharmaceutical supplies across the desert. She keeps her CB radio on at all times now, listening carefully to every voice, every warning, every strange message that comes through the static. She's never heard Wayne Dawson again. But sometimes, late at night on empty stretches of highway, she hears other voices, other drivers who didn't make it, who are still out there on the road, trying to save the living from the mistakes that killed them. And Trish listens. She always listens. Because she knows that the highway is more than just asphalt and white lines. It's a river of souls, flowing endlessly through the darkness. And some of those souls are still trying to make things right. When other drivers ask her about the strange detours she sometimes takes, or why she suddenly pulls over for no apparent reason, Trish just tells them she's being cautious, following her instincts, trusting her training. She doesn't tell them about the voices, about Wayne Dawson, about the night she was saved 3 times by a dead man on a CB radio. Some things are too strange to share. Some debts are too profound to ever repay. So Trish just drives and listens and remembers. And every time she passes the I-17 connector in Phoenix, she says a quiet thank you to the voice that kept her off it on that August night when death was waiting in her regular route. Story 6. The Hitchhiker Who Knew. Raymond Tuckson was 63 years old and had been driving trucks for 42 of those years. He'd started at 21, fresh out of a failed attempt at college, and had never looked back. The road was his life, his home, his entire world. He'd seen the country change over 4 decades, watched interstates get built and cities expand, seen technology transform trucking from a rough-and-tumble industry into a high-tech logistics operation. But through all those changes, Raymond had remained constant, reliable, steady, and completely alone. He'd never married, never had kids, never even had a serious relationship that lasted more than a few months. The job made it impossible, he told himself. Always moving, never in one place long enough to build something real. But the truth, which Raymond barely admitted even to himself, was that he preferred it this way. People were complicated. The road was simple. On a cool September evening in 2021, Raymond was driving through Northern California on Highway 101, hauling lumber from Eureka down to San Francisco. It was a route he'd driven 1,000 times, winding through redwood forests and along coastal cliffs. Beautiful country, even after seeing it for decades. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that made the ocean look like liquid fire. Just south of Leggett, Raymond saw a figure standing on the shoulder. A hitchhiker, which was unusual these days. Most people had phones and could call for help. Hitchhiking had become rare, almost extinct. As Raymond got closer, he could see it was an old man, maybe 70 or 75, wearing worn jeans and a denim jacket. The man had his thumb out in the classic hitchhiker gesture, but there was something in his posture that suggested he knew Raymond would stop, like he'd been waiting specifically for this truck. Raymond's first instinct was to drive past. He had a strict no-hitchhiker policy, had maintained it for 42 years. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the old man's age, or the isolation of this stretch of highway, or just a random impulse of compassion. Raymond pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet past the hitchhiker and waited. The old man walked up to the passenger door, moving slowly but steadily. He pulled the door open and looked up at Raymond with sharp, clear eyes that seemed too young for his weathered face. "Appreciate the stop," he said. "Name's Thomas. Heading south?" "San Francisco," Raymond replied. "I can take you as far as the Bay Area." "That'll do just fine." Thomas climbed into the cab with surprising agility for his apparent age, settling into the passenger seat with a satisfied sigh. "Been waiting for you for a while, Raymond." Raymond's hands tightened on the wheel. "I didn't tell you my name." "No, you didn't. But I know it anyway. Just like I know you've been driving this route for 37 years. Just like I know you've got exactly $463 in your wallet, plus a photo of a woman you haven't seen in 40 years, but never forgot." Raymond's mouth went dry. Everything Thomas said was true. The money, he'd counted it this morning. The photo, his mother, who died when Raymond was 23. He kept it in his wallet, the only family photo he'd ever carried. "Who the hell are you?" Thomas smiled, a gentle expression that didn't match the strangeness of his knowledge. "I'm a traveler, same as you. I just travel a little differently. Been walking these highways for, well, longer than you've been alive. Meeting drivers, sharing knowledge, trying to make a difference when I can." "That doesn't answer my question. How do you know things about me?" "Because I know everyone who stops for me. I see them, really see them, past, present, future." It's all kind of laid out like a map once you know how to read it. Thomas looked out the window at the darkening forest. You've lived a lonely life, Raymond. By choice, mostly. You tell yourself it's the job, but that's not really true. You're afraid. Afraid of loss, of pain, of what happens when you let someone matter. Raymond wanted to tell the old man to shut up, to get out of his truck, but he couldn't. Because everything Thomas was saying was true, hitting on thoughts Raymond had spent decades avoiding. I don't need a therapy session from a hitchhiker. No, probably not, but you need something. And tonight, driving down this highway, you're going to get it, whether you want it or not. Thomas settled back in his seat. Take the Piercy exit coming up. There's something you need to see. I'm not taking any exits. I'm delivering this load straight to San Francisco. You'll take the exit. Trust me. Thomas's voice was calm, certain, like he was stating a fact rather than making a prediction. Raymond fully intended to drive past the Piercy exit. But when it appeared in his headlights, his hands turned the wheel almost of their own accord. He heard himself cursing as he took the exit, unable to stop himself. What the hell is happening? You're going where you need to go. Don't fight it, Raymond. This is important. Thomas pointed to a side road leading away from the highway. Turn left here. Follow this road for about 3 miles. The side road was narrow and dark, barely wide enough for Raymond's truck. Tree branches scraped against the trailer as he drove. This was insane. He was letting a mysterious hitchhiker guide him down an unfamiliar road in the middle of nowhere. Every safety instinct Raymond had was screaming at him to stop, to turn around, to get back to the highway. But he kept driving, 3 miles exactly, watching his odometer. Then Thomas said, "Pull over here." Here was the middle of nowhere, just a wide spot in the road surrounded by dense forest. Raymond stopped, setting his air brakes, and turned to Thomas. "Okay, we're here. Now what?" "Now you wait. Someone's coming. Someone you need to meet." Thomas looked at his watch, an old analog model that probably cost $20. "Should be about 5 minutes." Raymond sat in the darkness, engine idling, completely confused about what was happening or why he was going along with it. Thomas didn't speak, just sat peacefully in the passenger seat like he had all the time in the world. 4 minutes later, Raymond saw headlights approaching from the opposite direction. A pickup truck, moving fast, too fast for this narrow road. The truck came around a bend, swerved, overcorrected, and went off the road. Raymond watched in horror as it crashed through the brush and slammed into a tree with a sickening crunch of metal. "Go help them," Thomas said quietly. "That's why you're here." Raymond was already moving, grabbing his flashlight and jumping down from the cab. He ran to the wrecked pickup, his heart pounding. The driver's side door was crumpled, but he could see someone inside, slumped over the wheel. Raymond yanked the passenger door open and climbed in. The driver was a woman, maybe 40 years old, unconscious but breathing. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. Raymond checked her pulse, steady and strong. He carefully moved her head back from the steering wheel, supporting her neck, trying to remember the first aid training he'd gotten decades ago. The woman's eyes fluttered open. What happened?" "You crashed. Don't move too much. I'm going to call for help." Raymond pulled out his phone, relieved to see he had signal. He dialed 911 and gave the dispatcher their location as best he could. describing the road and the landmarks. "Help is coming," he told the woman. "You're going to be okay. Can you tell me your name?" "Sarah Holcomb." She winced, touching her head. "My daughter. I was rushing to get to her. She called, said she was in trouble. I wasn't paying attention to the road." "Is your daughter okay? Should we call her?" "I don't know. She's in Santa Rosa. I need to get to her." Sarah tried to move, and Raymond gently held her shoulders. "You're not going anywhere until the paramedics check you out. But I can call your daughter, let her know you're okay. What's her number?" Sarah gave him the number, and Raymond called. A young woman answered, voice panicked. "Mom? Where are you? I've been waiting." "This isn't your mother. My name is Raymond. Your mom's been in an accident, but she's okay. Emergency services are on the way. Can you tell me what's wrong? Your mom said you needed help." The daughter, whose name was Emily, broke down crying. She was at a gas station in Santa Rosa. Her car had broken down, and she was scared because several men were hanging around making her uncomfortable. She'd called her mother in a panic, not thinking about the fact that her mother would have to drive through dangerous mountain roads in the dark to reach her. Raymond talked to Emily, calming her down, getting her exact location. He called the Santa Rosa police on his other phone, explaining the situation, asking them to send an officer to check on a stranded woman at that gas station. Within minutes, Emily called back to say a police officer had arrived and was helping her. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, along with local police and a fire truck. They stabilized Sarah, checked her injuries, a concussion, some cuts and bruises, but nothing life-threatening. She'd been incredibly lucky. If Raymond hadn't been there to call for help immediately, hadn't been there to contact her daughter and prevent Emily from doing something potentially dangerous out of fear, the night could have ended much worse. As the paramedics were loading Sarah into the ambulance, she grabbed Raymond's hand. "Thank you. You saved my life. How did you happen to be here?" Raymond looked back at his truck, where Thomas should have been waiting. The passenger seat was empty. He could see it clearly through the windshield. No one there. No sign that anyone had ever been there. I was just passing through," Raymond said slowly. "Right place, right time. Well, thank God for that. I mean it, thank you. If you hadn't been here..." She squeezed his hand before the paramedics took her away. Raymond walked back to his truck alone. He climbed into the cab and looked at the passenger seat. The vinyl cushion showed no impression, no sign of anyone having sat there. But on the dashboard, someone had placed a small piece of paper, folded in half. Raymond opened it. In neat, old-fashioned handwriting, it read, "You spent 42 years running from connection because you were afraid of loss. But tonight, you learned something important. The pain of loss is the price we pay for the privilege of love, and it's worth paying. You have more to give than you ever knew, Raymond. Don't waste what time you have left." Thomas. Raymond sat there for a long time, holding that note, watching the emergency lights flash in his mirrors as they worked on clearing the crashed pickup. He thought about the woman he'd helped, about her daughter, about the chain of events that had brought him to this exact spot at this exact time, about Thomas, who seemed to know things that were impossible to know, who'd guided him here for a reason Raymond was only beginning to understand. He drove back to the highway and continued on to San Francisco. delivering his load on time despite the delay. But something had changed in Raymond during that strange night. He started talking to people more, starting conversations at truck stops, actually engaging with the world around him instead of just passing through it. He called his brother, whom he hadn't spoken to in 15 years, and reconnected. 6 months later, at a truck stop in Nevada, Raymond met a woman named Carol who worked in the restaurant. They started talking and kept talking on his subsequent trips through. Eventually, they started dating. It was awkward and difficult for Raymond, who'd spent so long alone. But he persisted, because he kept thinking about Thomas's note, about not wasting what time he had left. Raymond and Carol got married 2 years later. He was 65, she was 59, and they both knew they were starting late. But better late than never. Raymond still drives trucks, though less frequently now, doing regional runs instead of cross-country hauls. Carol rides with him sometimes, and they drive together, talking about everything and nothing. Raymond still has Thomas's note, kept in his wallet where the photo of his mother used to be. He moved that photo to his new home, to a frame on the living room wall. But the note stays with him on the road, a reminder of the night everything changed. He's never seen Thomas again, never picked up another hitchhiker who knew impossible things. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, Raymond imagines he can see an old man standing on the shoulder, thumb out, waiting for the next driver who needs guidance, waiting to show someone else that the road doesn't have to be traveled alone. And Raymond hopes that wherever Thomas is, whatever he is, he knows that his message was received, that Raymond finally understood, that it's never too late to stop running from connection and start running toward it instead. Story 7. The Cargo That Watched. Felix Kowalski had worked for Transcontinental Logistics for 11 years, specializing in high-value cargo transport. He carried electronics, pharmaceuticals, luxury goods, anything that needed extra security and careful handling. His truck was equipped with GPS tracking, security cameras, and an alarm system that would alert both him and the company if anyone tampered with the trailer. Felix took his job seriously, maintaining a spotless record and a reputation for absolute reliability. In late December 2020, Felix received an unusual assignment. The dispatcher called him personally instead of sending the usual digital notification, which was the first sign that this run was different. "We need you to pick up a special load in Portland. Take it down to Sacramento," the dispatcher said. "Clients paying triple our usual rate for immediate delivery." And Felix, this one comes with some specific instructions. You don't stop unless absolutely necessary. You don't open the trailer. And you don't let anyone else near the cargo. Clear. Felix had carried sensitive loads before, so the instructions weren't that unusual. What's in the trailer? Art pieces, high-value sculptures and paintings being moved for a private collector. The client is extremely particular about security. That's all you need to know. Felix picked up the loaded trailer at a warehouse in Portland on a Friday evening. The trailer had been sealed before he arrived, the security tags in place, everything looking legitimate. He did his standard pre-trip inspection, checked the paperwork, and headed out. The route was straightforward, I-5 south through Oregon and into California. About 9 hours of driving with normal conditions. The first few hours were uneventful. Felix drove through Portland's southern suburbs, and into the dark forests that lined much of the Oregon Coast Range. Traffic was light on a Friday night, mostly other trucks and the occasional car. Felix settled into the rhythm of the drive, listening to a podcast about World War II history. Around midnight, just past Eugene, Felix felt the trailer shift. It was subtle, just a slight change in the weight distribution that he felt through the steering wheel. He checked his mirrors, but everything looked normal. The trailer was tracking straight, no visible problems. Still, the shift bothered him. Cargo shouldn't move in a properly secured trailer. Art pieces should have been packed and braced to prevent any movement whatsoever. Felix considered pulling over to check, but remembered the dispatcher's instructions. Don't stop unless absolutely necessary. And this didn't feel necessary yet. Just a small shift, probably nothing. He kept driving. 20 minutes later, it happened again. A definite shift, more pronounced this time, like something large had moved from one side of the trailer to the other. Felix glanced at his security camera feed, which showed the trailer doors. They were still sealed, no sign of tampering. But the movement had definitely been real. Felix picked up his phone and called the dispatcher. No answer. He tried again. Still no answer. That was odd. The dispatch office was supposed to be staffed 24/7. He left a message, explaining the cargo movement and asking for guidance. The highway was getting more isolated now. Long stretches with no exits and few other vehicles. The forest pressed close on both sides, dense and dark beyond the reach of Felix's headlights. He checked his GPS. Another 2 hours to the California border, then 5 more to Sacramento. He could make it, just keep driving. Another shift. This one was strong enough that Felix actually felt the trailer sway. Something was definitely wrong. Either the cargo hadn't been secured properly or what? Felix's mind tried to come up with explanations. Maybe the climate control had failed and temperature changes were affecting something. Maybe the trailer had been loaded unevenly and gravity was slowly pulling things out of position. But none of those explanations felt right. The shifts seemed too deliberate, too purposeful, like something in the trailer was moving itself. Felix tried calling the dispatcher again. This time, the call wouldn't go through at all. No signal. That shouldn't happen. His company phone was supposed to work anywhere with cell coverage, and I-5 through Oregon had decent coverage. He tried his personal phone. Same problem. No signal. His radio suddenly crackled with static, making Felix jump. He hadn't had it on, but now it was blaring white noise through the cab. He reached to turn it off, and just before his fingers touched the dial, a voice came through the static. "Help me." Felix froze. "Hello? Who is this?" "Help me. Please. He trapped me." The voice was female, young, terrified. Felix grabbed the mic. "Where are you? Are you in trouble?" "In the dark. Can't see. So cold. He put me in the dark and I can't get out." Felix's blood ran cold. Are you in my trailer?" A long pause. Then, "I don't know. I don't know where I am. Just dark. So dark. He said no one would hear me, but I can hear the road. I can hear the engine. Am I moving?" Jesus Christ. Felix's hands were shaking. "Hang on. I'm going to pull over and open the trailer. Just hang on." "No, don't stop. He'll know. He's watching. He always knows." "Who's watching? Who did this to you?" The radio dissolved back into static. Felix tried calling again, but the voice didn't return. He was breathing hard now, his mind racing. If there was someone in his trailer, someone trapped and calling for help. He had to get them out. But the voice had said not to stop, said someone was watching. Felix looked at his cab's security camera feeds. They showed views of all around the truck, sides, back, under the trailer. He watched carefully, looking for any sign of someone following him. The road behind was empty. No cars, no trucks, nothing. Just his own taillights reflecting off the trees. The trailer shifted again, hard enough that Felix had to correct his steering. Something slammed against the interior wall, a thunderous bang that echoed through the cab. Then another bang, and another. Like someone or something was throwing themselves against the walls, trying to get out. Felix made a decision. He was pulling over. Dispatcher's instructions or not, security measures or not, if there was someone in that trailer, he wasn't going to just keep driving. He started looking for a safe place to stop, somewhere with good lighting and hopefully some other people around. But the trailer had other ideas. Every time Felix tried to slow down, he felt the cargo shift violently, throwing the rig off balance. It was like whatever was in there knew what he was trying to do and was fighting it. When he accelerated back to highway speed, the movement stopped. When he tried slowing again, it resumed. Something was forcing him to keep driving, to keep moving south. And Felix had the terrible realization that he wasn't in control anymore. He was just a part of some mechanism, some process he didn't understand. The radio crackled again. A different voice this time, male and cold. "Continue to the delivery address, Mr. Kowalski. Do not stop. Do not open the trailer. Do not deviate from the route." "Who the hell is this? What's in my trailer?" "Continue to the delivery address. Failure to comply will result in consequences." "I'm not moving another inch until you tell me what's going on. Is there someone in my trailer? Is someone in danger?" "The only person in danger right now is you, Mr. Kowalski, and whether you remain in danger depends entirely on your cooperation. Drive to Sacramento, deliver the trailer, walk away. That's all you need to do." Felix's mind was racing. This was obviously illegal, obviously wrong. He should call the police, should stop immediately and get help. But his phones weren't working, and he was in the middle of nowhere. And something in the trailer was getting more violent with each passing mile. The female voice came back, weaker now. "Please, help me. I'm so cold. I can't feel my hands anymore. He's going to kill me. He's going to..." The radio cut off with a squeal of feedback. That decided it. Felix slammed on his brakes, bringing the truck to a shuddering stop on the shoulder. He grabbed his flashlight and his tire iron, the closest thing to a weapon he had, and jumped down from the cab. If there was someone in that trailer, he was getting them out right now. Consequences be damned. The night air was cold and damp. Felix could see his breath fogging in the flashlight beam as he walked toward the trailer. The security seal was still in place, unbroken. He reached for it, preparing to break it and open the doors. Something hit the inside of the trailer doors so hard that they bulged outward. Felix stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. Another impact, then another. The entire trailer was rocking on its suspension. Whatever was in there was big and strong and very, very angry. "Let me out," the female voice, but different now, not scared, furious. "Let me out." The impacts continued, each one denting the trailer doors a little more. Felix backed away, his tire iron held uselessly in front of him. This was beyond anything he'd trained for, anything he'd ever experienced. He needed help, Real help. He ran back to his cab and grabbed his CB radio, which still seemed to work, even though his phones didn't. This is a truck driver on I-5 southbound, somewhere between Eugene and Roseburg. I have an emergency situation. Repeat, emergency situation. There's something in my trailer, and I need police assistance immediately. Static. Then impossibly, his own voice came back through the speaker. This is a truck driver on I-5 southbound, somewhere between Eugene and Roseburg. Playing back exactly what he'd just said, word for word. Felix stared at the radio. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. He looked at his security cameras. The feeds were showing something impossible. The trailer doors were closed and sealed in one camera, but open and empty in another. Both views couldn't be real. His GPS showed him on I-5, but the mile markers he was seeing didn't match the location. Reality was breaking down around him, and Felix didn't know what was real anymore. Was there really someone in the trailer? Was any of this actually happening? Or had he been drugged somehow? Was this a hallucination? The banging stopped. Suddenly, completely. The trailer sat still and silent. Felix held his breath, waiting. Nothing. He stepped out of the cab again, approaching the trailer carefully. The dents in the doors were gone. The metal was smooth and undamaged. The security seal was in place, unbroken. Felix put his hand on the trailer door. The metal was ice cold, much colder than it should have been. He could feel something on the other side. Not hear it, not see it, but feel it. A presence, aware of him, watching him through the metal walls. Mr. Kowalski, the male voice on the radio, calm and patient. You've stopped. I asked you not to stop. Now we have to do this the difficult way. Felix's cab door slammed shut on its own, the locks engaging with a solid click. The engine started, even though Felix had taken the keys with him. He watched in horror as his truck began to move, pulling away from him, leaving him standing on the shoulder of I-5 in the middle of the night. No, stop! Felix ran after it, but his truck was accelerating, taillights disappearing into the darkness. His truck, his cargo, everything, gone. Stolen by something he couldn't understand or fight. Felix stood alone on the empty highway, surrounded by dark forest, holding a flashlight and a tire iron. After a moment of shocked paralysis, he started walking. Eventually, he saw headlights approaching. A car, the first traffic he'd seen in almost an hour. He waved it down, explaining that his truck had been stolen, that he needed help. The driver, a middle-aged woman, called the police for him. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Felix told them everything. The movements in the trailer, the voices on the radio, the truck driving away on its own. He could see the skepticism in their eyes. They probably thought he was drunk or high, or had sold his own cargo and was trying to cover it up with a crazy story. But they took his statement, called his company, started an investigation. The truck was found 3 days later in a salvage yard outside of Sacramento, completely empty. No cargo, no sign of what had been in the trailer. The security seals had been removed professionally. The GPS tracker had been destroyed, and the security camera footage had been wiped. As far as the physical evidence showed, Felix had simply delivered an empty trailer. Transcontinental Logistics fired him. The insurance company denied his claim. The client sued for the value of the lost cargo, though Felix never found out what the cargo actually was. The lawsuit was settled out of court, information sealed. and Felix was left with nothing but a destroyed career and a story no one believed. Felix doesn't drive trucks anymore. He works in a warehouse now, a day job with regular hours and no long-distance routes. He stays off the highways, especially I-5 through Oregon, and he never, ever asks what's in a sealed trailer, because Felix knows the truth now, even if no one believes him. Some cargo isn't art or electronics or pharmaceuticals. Some cargo is something else entirely. Something that watches from inside sealed containers. Something that can bend reality and steal trucks and communicate through radios. Something that gets transported across the country in the dead of night, hidden in trailers that drivers are told never to open. And sometimes, Felix wakes up in the middle of the night, hearing a voice in his head. That female voice, cold and angry. Let me out. He never will. He never can. Because whatever was in that trailer is still out there, still being moved from place to place by drivers who don't know what they're carrying. And Felix is grateful, every single day, that he's not one of them anymore. The highway has its secrets, and Felix learned that some secrets are meant to stay sealed in the dark, moving eternally through the night, from one unknown destination to another.